Where and when were you born?
In Marblehead on February 25th, 1923. That's Massachusetts.
Like family details, like your parents' occupations and number of, and gender of your siblings.
My father was a boat builder at that time. And during the war, he was working for the Navy Yard. And I went into the Marine, I was going to school in 1941. And in 1941, I was going to an agricultural school. And I was ready to graduate. And I met my wife about 6 months before that. And we got married on April 26th of 1941. And
what were you doing before you entered the service?
I was a tree climber and also working at nights at wall work, making machine guns and that sort of thing for a machine company in Beverly, Mass.
Have you had other family members who have served in any kind of military service?
Yes, my brother was in the Army.
Can you talk about your siblings? Do you have any other siblings besides your brother?
Oh yes, I had a 2-year-old daughter when I went in, because it was 2 years later that I went in service, and so because I had a mother and father, and that was brother, and then an older brother who was a priest and married an old missionary. I can't think of anybody other than cousins and all that sort of thing. You probably don't need to know that.
Okay. How did you enter the service?
I enlisted. It was at that time. It was two years after the invasion of Pearl Harbor, so it was likely that I was going to be drafted. And that summer, the coming summer in 1943, and so what I did was join the Marine Corps instead of waiting to get drafted and go in the Army.
Okay, so you enlisted?
Yes.
Okay. Why was the reason you chose that specific branch of service?
I wanted to get right into fighting, and I knew the Marines would.
Was your departure for training camp in your early days of training?
You like to hear about boot camp? I went to boot camp in April, the end of April, and in 1943, and I was in boot camp for about 3 months, and that's to break you from civilian life. And from there I went to advanced training, and that was in South Carolina, Parris Island.
How did you adapt to that life, like the physical, the barracks, the food, and the social life?
In the boot camp, you're awake all but say about 6 hours through the whole thing every night. That's all. And that was the idea of breaking you. We marched every day from 3 to 5 hours, and then you had to know how to know the whole manual of the Marine Corps. And in that time we were training at firing your M1 weapon, which is 2 weeks at the rifle range. This was towards the end of the 3 months. And when we finished there, you got a 10-day leave. And from there, I went to North Carolina for advanced training. And
do you know where in North Carolina?
What's that?
Where at North Carolina?
Yes.
Where, what city?
Oh, what city? Camp Lejeune. It was in near Jacksonville. I'm trying to think of this quick. But there we started in right away to form a regiment, and so that we had to train with. This is all different people that you were in boot camp with. This would and engineers, carpenters, painters, bridge builders, bulldozer operators, that type of stuff. So we're similar to what the CB is in the Navy, which is construction battalion.
Okay. We're going to talk about the wartime service. Where did you serve?
What did I what?
Did you serve?
What did I serve?
Where
Like
did you
where?
serve, Dad?
Oh.
Where? The Pacific.
Hmm?
You were serving in the Pacific?
Oh yes, that's where from Camp Lejeune I went more advanced training, and Camp Pendleton, California. We trained there for probably another year. We were in North Carolina about close to a year, and then we went from there to do more advanced training. But each time you trained, you were going with a bigger group, and from there I went to Hawaii to train, and in the mountains of where the volcano is in the main isle of Hawaii. And training there, that's when I was specifically trained for explosives, which we'd use in the war. And that would be, my squad would be a demolition squad. And so we would, when demolition squad is attached in a time of war to one infantry company, which is about 220 men. And,
What kind of action did you witness, and what were your duties away from the front line?
Away from the front line was still just preparing. We didn't even know where we were going when we left Hawaii in the 1945 in January, and to join in with other individuals from all the 3rd, 4th, and 5th divisions, which is like 60,000 men, and there was 800 ships in our going from. They rendezvoused at Saipan. I went from, and we went in a troop ship from Hawaii to Saipan, and when we got to Saipan, we shifted to smaller boat, which is an LST, and on board that LST there was 8 landing vehicles for invading the island of Iwo Jima, and we never knew in all our training where we were going. They only told us when we were at sea and when we had no way of anybody finding out where we're going. And we were at sea. When we left Saipan, the convoy could only travel at 1 speed, which was the slowest boat, which the boat I was on was an LST, and it was a ship that opens up in the front, and I think there were 6 of these tanks in there that we would land on. They have tracks on them, and they crawl right up on the beach when they land. out in the rendezvous area where we were. We'd go around a circle at about, say, waiting for waves to land on the island, and we'd go round and round until and I was in the 9th wave.
What were your emotions relating to combat, like witnessing the casualties around you and the destruction around you?
It's, I could tell you better if I just go and seek it from where I just left off. When we landed and so-called left this LST, the ship would open up right out in the open water, and we'd sink down, and the water was only about 1.5 feet from where we were in this tank, and this held about 16 men. And we were in the 9th wave, which probably they started in it just at daybreak, so it was probably in the mid-morning. And as we were supposed to go in and approach the beach and go up on the beach, it was impossible to go in farther than we were out in the water about only 10 feet, but all these vehicles had been bombed there on the beach, and we couldn't go any further, so we had to get out, the coxswain says. And being engineers, we had all types of explosives, all mine equipment, everything like this. So we just threw it over the side, figuring, well, we're only in about 4 feet of water. When we went over the side, we were in 6 feet of water. And we had to walk up from there, a very steep grade. That's why they misjudged the beach was just not too far from the volcanic Iwo Jima. The Mount Suribachi was right there.
Can you talk about the article you gave me? Discuss what you were
Yes.
telling me before?
Well, that I was the sergeant in charge of these 12 men, and when we got ourselves out of the water, we were up on the beach and drenched. We had only our rifles. We never had any of the equipment that that went west, and we couldn't move. We just laid on the beach for probably maybe 5 hours, and in that time I was trying to figure out, nothing was the way it was we had planned. So when I got on the beach, I told my men not to move, and I went out and just searched the area where I thought we were supposed to meet, and finally I found them, the company I was attached to. So went back and got my men, but this was all, we were crawling and trying to stay in foxholes, which was impossible almost to dig, because it was all like coarse sand. So if you try to dig a hole in coarse sand, it gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And when it gets bigger, more men are getting into it, trying to get to dig, so that instead of one little single hole you could dig, you had enough that could hold about 15 people. And it was likely that we'd get bombed that way. So we just didn't stay long enough in those holes. And on my way to the next one, I went in there, and there was all men that looked like they were just come off the ship. And I asked them there if they knew where my company was. And one man spoke out, and he said, they're all dead. And they're all laying there, pointing in over the side with their rifles. You know. That was kind of scary. And I went on further, and then it was dead bodies, pieces of bodies, heads and feet. and there were all types of equipment on the ground. And the bombing was getting less than it was getting down in the evening. And so when I found my company commander, he told me we can't move because the fire is so heavy from the mountain, and our job was to be demolition at the mountain. So we were there for 2 days before we could move. But in the 2 days, we did chores for them, which was carrying ammunition to the front lines and so forth like that. And on the 3rd day, the company commander told me, he said, we can use you now. It's volunteer work. He said, we've got a scout that knows where the caves are that I'm supposed to blow. And so we proceeded there, and the first cave was very large. I mean, and compared to what I expected, it was big enough to drive a small truck through. And so we were using C2, which is an explosive. It's now in the new wars, they're using C4. So this was about half as strong as that. So we doubled up our load when we blow the cave, and it would blow twice or 3 times that close. You know, it was the loads we were putting on it. So then the scout would take us to about 6 more. And but they were getting smaller because we're getting closer to the trail that led to the top of the mountain. So while we were going on that, after we got to the 6th one, the scout left us, and he said, "You're on your own." And he said, "I'll be able to report back that we can move the whole company." And so we stayed out there, and we blew all day long. We started early in the morning. And we had men going back, my men going back to pick up more explosive. And, but about the end of the day, I was the only one spotted, and I got hit by a machine gun and a mortar, and my machine gun bullet went through my arm, and the mortar and shrapnel and all got in my chest. And but it was like a spent mortar. Just the hot metal was embedded in my chest. So they wrapped me up, and I could walk and everything. So 2 assistant squad leaders stayed there with the rest of the men, and about late in the afternoon, I started back. And it was probably 150 yards back to where my medic's place would be. And I got back there, and they give me morphine. And that evening, they put me out on a hospital ship, and then they operated on me and so forth there. Yeah.
How long was it before you got back in combat?
I never got back in the combat. I was the bullet wound through my arm was going to take quite a while to heal. The mortars didn't. So it was probably 9 months that I was 9 months that I was recuperated, and I got back to California just on VJ Day, which was the war was over in Japan, but they shipped me over anyway. And I went to Hawaii, and I was there for 3 months, and then they released me because I had 1 child at that time. But they went by the point system.
Did you form any kind of friendships in there?
Oh yes, one of my best buddies married my cousin. When we were in California there, he had a correspondence with her, and when he got back, he married her. He had 5 children.
How did you stay in touch with your family and your friends back home?
I wrote every day and to my wife. Once in a while I'd write to my family, but she would also let them know. But I could never tell her, once we left the States, I could never tell her, you know, where we are, what we were doing. You couldn't mention anything about it. But she never got some of them till she, well, probably she'd get 10 letters at one time. So I figured that that's what happened.
Your recreation or off-duty pursuits?
Well, luckily enough in Hawaii, was very nice. Our captain says, we asked him if we could go hunting. There were wild boar up there. So over Christmas, before the invasion, this was our last Christmas there, and so 5 of us went out hunting boar. And a fellow from North Carolina knew how to hunt them, and but we had M1s, not the, and so anyway, we caught 3 boar, carried it back on sticks. It was about 5 miles away from the camp, and the night cooked it that evening, and we went out the next day with 10 men, and then we got about 6 or 8 boar, and we brought that back, and the whole company the next day ate. But then the whole company wanted to go hunting. Well, then it was canceled.
Okay. How did you make extra money?
Oh, let's see. When we were in training, like at different places, I never had much cash because most of it was all sending home. But you could collect bottles and so forth like that, the beer bottles, and that's how we would get money. We had a system worked up that we could collect bottles and bring them back in and refunds.
Okay. Where were you when the war ended?
Like I say, I was in California earlier. The war had ended, but we were on ship to go overseas again, but they wouldn't let us off ship because they knew that we would probably try to get home or go over the hill or AWOL, and so they wouldn't let us off ship.
So you returned home on the ship?
Yeah.
Was there a reception by your family or your community when you got back?
Oh yes, it was big parties.
How did you readjust back to your civilian life after going through all of that?
It was kind of funny. You didn't want to talk about like I am now, or you wouldn't talk about. You're just so glad to get out of it. And I was in what they call the Marine Reserve, so once I got discharged, I was finished with the Marine Corps, and that was in 1945. But I mean, as far as they could call me back if we had another war at that time. But I went to veterans organizations and all that stuff, you know. And
are you still in contact with your fellow veterans over the years, or membership?
yes, we belonged to the 5th Division, which was the company, the division I was in. And they were, the division's like 20,000 men. So I went to several of those, and then we broke up and had company, which was roughly, there were 200 in a company. That was, then we'd go, because it was so impersonal in the big ones. And finally we were down to about 20 men at the last one we had.
Have you guys had a recent one?
No, we finished last year. They come back, everybody's too old and weak or don't want to travel.
Can I interject?
Absolutely.
Tell them about, like, was it in Georgetown or at the Marine, the statue, the memorial?
Oh yeah, the memorial in Washington.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the of the raising of the flag of on Iwo Jima, that of which that time as that when I was on board ship wounded is the day before I was helping to clear the way so that 28th Regiment could go up the mountain and make sure it was cleared, and that's when they raised the flag, and that flag is so famous of Iwo Jima now. It's universal.
The movie Flag of Our Fathers. Right?
Yes.
I've seen it. It's
Yeah.
so good. Okay. How did the wartime experiences affect your life?
Like I say, I didn't want to talk about it, and when I received the medal, I never thought I should have received it, because everybody should have, or I never thought of it as I did anything that was to warrant giving me a Navy Cross.
Okay, did you learn any life lessons while you were in there?
What kind of lessons?
Life lessons, like, throughout life.
Oh yeah. I'll tell you one thing, I prayed a lot. And I've done so ever since. And but I think it would be a great thing if everybody, like they grow up so fast in the service, if they get in there and just even if it was not a wartime thing, that it's so different that I just think it would be great for everybody to do it. But they stopped drafting and everything, but
What kind of jobs did you have after you came back home?
you know, at the time I come out, I was going to go to agricultural college and study trees, but when I got home, I couldn't very well run a home at that time. There was hardly any work at all, and so my father asked me if we wanted to paint with him. He was a house painter at that time, and my brother was home at that time. So the three of us started painting, house painting, and we painted, or I painted for 60 years.
We practically had to take his brush away, kicking and screaming.
Okay. Do you have any advice you'd like to share with anybody, or anything you'd want to add to this?
Oh, I just appreciate living. I lost my wife, but it's so good. And I thought I didn't care, you know. But I do. I don't know how else I can answer that.
Do you have any advice for students who are like planning to go into kind of services?
Say that one again, I think.
Like, do you have any advice for students who are planning to go into military services?
Well, like I say, I think it's great if somebody could take 2 years of their life and do it, and it's like gaining 10 years in knowledge, and because you get so broad-minded. You know, you travel and you see people that you probably never would see, and be with people, learn how other people are living, just in the training.